Sounds great. My name is Jessica Garrow. I'm a principal and consultant with Design Workshop, and I'm joined by Brenna Laffey, who is an associate and our project manager for the project. And we will run through a presentation today talking about the progress on guiding Guilford, what's brought us here today, what we've heard from the community, and we'll run through a draft of the plan. And I'll let Brenna pull our screen up to start sharing. Okay, great. So welcome. We are so excited to run through the progress on guiding Guilford today. It's like there's a little lag in our presentation. Apologies for that. So today we are going to cover what is a comprehensive plan, why has the county embarked on this process over the past about 14 months or so. We'll go through that plan process, and then, as I said, we'll go through plan content. We will cover next steps and a Q&A at the end as well. So Guiding Guilford is the name of the comprehensive plan for Guilford County. It identifies where we are today. So it does an inventory of existing conditions, everything from transportation, economics, and demographics. And then it identifies where are we going? What is our vision for the future? And the vision for Guiding Guilford has been crafted from extensive community engagement. And then we identify how do we get there? And so we'll go through some planned themes and action steps to implement the community's vision. The comprehensive plan is a document for the next 15 to 20 years. And so it is really a visionary document. The comprehensive plan is a strategic guidebook for the future. It integrates existing planning work, and it's a long-range planning tool. It establishes, as I said, the vision and some aspirational goals. It's also required by North Carolina state statute, and so it's a really important piece of what the county does to make sure we're compliant with state law. The comprehensive plan is not zoning or land use standards or a budget. It is that vision and is not those kind of more regulatory pieces. So you can see our consultant team here. Design Workshop was the lead consultant for the county with support from the Lee Institute on community engagement as well as key community topics. And we were really fortunate to have their partnership for the process. We were also really fortunate to have an amazing steering committee that represents a number of organizations throughout the county. And I see some of our steering committee members on the webinar today. The steering committee was a really key part of our process, and they were an advisory group to provide high-level perspectives and sometimes a deep dive into final plan content and community engagement strategies to make sure that we were hearing from a broad spectrum of the community. And again, just a huge thanks to our steering committee members for their participation. So plan process really started with some focus groups in 2023. Then we moved into a community-wide survey in the summer of last year. And we had community workshops at a number of different points throughout the process. And we have an additional workshop tonight talking about the plan, similar presentation to this one, really providing you all an opportunity to provide final comments on the plan before it goes to adoption. You can scan the code that's on this screen. That goes to guilfordplan.com, and that is where you can download a copy of the final plan document. And we also have a survey there where we're asking folks to provide comments, and you'll have an opportunity to do that here at the end of the webinar. But if you would like to take some time with the document or share the information with friends and family, please go to guilfordplan.com and you can download the plan there. So in terms of community outreach, our team and the county team really had a significant lift and wanted to make sure we were hearing from as many community members as possible. And so used a variety of methods from social media to survey. County sent some direct letters to community members to make sure that they were aware of the project. We have a project website that's seen significant traffic and a number of workshops and open house events. So far in the process, we've had 7 different workshops with the community, 5 steering committee meetings, and a number of focus groups. So we're really excited from the great outreach and feedback that we've heard from the community and how that's really provided the basis and the core of the plan that we're presenting today. So there are a couple of common themes that really led to the creation of the plan themes, which we'll go into here in a moment. One of the common things that we heard was the importance of addressing the cost of living, particularly related to housing and transportation options throughout the county. So that's something that is really reflective in how we've drafted a future land use map as well as the plan document. We also heard significant support for protecting the natural environment, restoring habitats, and making sure that there's kind of a conservation focus, as well as parks, open space, and recreation focus within the county. An additional item that we heard was the importance of infrastructure and making sure that infrastructure is really thought about when we're thinking about where growth is located. And so we'll cover some more detail about that. We wanted to pull out just a few items from the survey that were important findings and really similar to what we've heard throughout the engagement process. So community members in Guilford County are most satisfied with nature and outdoors and education. And overall, I have some support and positive thoughts related to cost of living and quality of life. That said, the most important topics to focus on were things like housing affordability and transportation affordability. In terms of managing growth, that cost of living shows up, access to services and environmental protection. And then we also asked some questions specific to different land use types and what to prioritize in different portions of the county. Agriculture is a really important part of the economy and the culture here in Guilford County. And we saw that reflected particularly in some of the land use items that should be prioritized within the northeast and southeast portions of the county.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Brenna Lappy with Design Workshop, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit of an overview of the plan content just to get you oriented, and then we'll walk through some of the key elements of the plan. So this is a snapshot of the table of contents for the plan. So there's some key definitions at the beginning to help you get familiar with some terms that you might find throughout the document. An executive summary that gives you a quick snapshot of the highlights of the plan. An introduction that dives into a little bit more detail on the background, introduction to the vision and themes and how to use and navigate the plan. The process that dives a little bit deeper into the community outreach and input. Context that dives into each of the plan elements, includes regional and local context, demographic trends, and a review of current conditions that help to inform the recommendations in the plan. And then the future land use framework, which we'll cover today, as well as the planning themes. The planning themes are organized, a way to organize all of the goals and policies and action items that are recommended in the plan. And we'll give you a highlight of that today. There's more details in the plan itself on the specific action items that are recommended and the timing. And then there's an appendix that has all of the supplementary documentation, summaries from the community outreach, and the survey. So we wanted to start, this was, if you took part in some of the previous public engagement, you might be familiar with the plan vision that we workshopped with you all in the last round of public workshops. And so this is the draft vision statement, or the final draft vision statement that is currently in the plan. That's a result of that community engagement process. And this is really that kind of big vision for Guilford County. So rooted in rich history, Guilford County is a welcoming and increasingly diverse community featuring rural landscapes, working farms, thriving businesses, and healthy neighborhoods. The county will foster a resilient and vibrant future by promoting sustainable and responsible development patterns, supporting innovative businesses, facilitating a variety of housing types, and protecting a unique culture so that it can be enjoyed and appreciated by all. So this is really kind of the guiding post for the rest of the plan. Then we have the planning themes. So the goals of the plan are divided into these 7 planning themes that were developed throughout the community process. And so community character, attainable housing, diversified transportation and mobility, resilient economy, equitable services, protected natural environment and green space, and quality and context sensitive infrastructure. And we're going to give a little highlight into each of these in just a moment. So a little bit of a snapshot on how to use the plan. So as mentioned, we have our 7 planning themes that help to reflect back to the vision statement. For each of these planning themes, there is a goal statement that identifies the desired outcome for each of those topics. Then we have specific policies or statements that provide direction on how to achieve these goals. And then there are specific action items that are identified for each of the policies to help achieve the goals and vision of the plan. Wanted to give you a little bit of context here. As you all know, Guilford County is experiencing growth and growth pressures. So some background in terms of the amount of growth that the county is receiving. Over the past 10 years, the growth rate's been around 10%. And unincorporated areas, which are those areas outside of the cities and municipalities of the county, have seen a little bit slower growth at around 9.4%. So this amount of population growth that we're anticipating has influenced how we're thinking about the plan and the future land use map considerations. And we heard from the community, as Jessica mentioned, that concerns around managing this growth. And so we can't necessarily stop growth, but we can manage where it goes and the policies that shape it. So future land use considerations that went into the map itself include doing an analysis on most suitable areas. So we took a look at the suitability for residential development, suitability for commercial development. We took a look at those environmentally sensitive and environmentally rich areas that are important to protect, and overlaid all of this information along with your existing land use and existing development plans that are already in motion, and overlaid all this information to identify those areas that might be able to best accept growth in the future and that might be best conserved. And so we developed this future land use framework guiding principles map. And this is just at a very high level, some of the kind of condensing that information down into those areas to preserve that are in the darkest blue. These are areas that have the most environmentally and natural sensitive areas, agricultural lands, rural communities. I'm sorry, those are the lightest blue areas. Areas to enhance are those areas that might consider some small to medium-sized improvements, but they're largely similar. They might just be keeping up with the changing economics and technologies. Those are areas to enhance. And then areas to transform are really places that already have momentum, that are positioned well for a higher level of density of development, commercial development, etc. And so all of those kind of guiding principles are fed into the future land use map. And we are going to talk through a little bit these place types that are on the map. But essentially, there is a range of place types from natural areas, rural living, open space and recreation, to residential, multifamily, and commercial. The kind of lightest yellow that you see is the rural living, which much of the unincorporated portions of the county are within that place type. And then there's some specific centers of activities. These are those dots and circles that you see on the map that describe potential areas that would be more accommodating for some small mixed use ranging to larger regional employment centers. So as mentioned, there's a range of intensity of development, and so you can see reflected in these place types your less intensely developed areas versus your higher development areas. So for each of these place types, you'll find in the plan a general character description that kind of describes the overall characteristics of the intention behind that place type. The general approach for wastewater treatment, so that identifies the anticipated system for wastewater, the anticipated approach to water surface and access, general residential density, so the anticipated amount of residential development there, and then what are the primary land uses that you would typically find there, and what are the secondary or supporting land uses that you might find there. Did want to mention here that Guilford County itself is not a water or wastewater service provider. And so any type of community system connection will require great coordination with regional partners. And just wanted to make that note here as we dive into additional information. So here's a zoom in map of the activity centers. You'll generally see there's a few areas that have been highlighted mainly around existing momentum for regional employment centers. Then you have your mixed use centers, which are in the red. There's about 4 that are identified in the plan. And again, based on existing and already plans in motion around mixed use development. And then you have rural centers, which are smaller neighborhood centers that might have something like a grocery store or those types of community amenities. And then a rural crossroad, which are your more rural context centers that might include something like a gas station or a fire station. So each of these center types as well, in addition to the other place types, have those same types of descriptions, and we're happy to answer any questions, but there's lots of detail in the plan that go into each of these place types and center types in more detail.
So moving into our policies, with the future land use map and within that chapter of the document, we have identified 4 key land use policies that are intended to help guide development in the county in the future. So the first is that any development needs to have a connection to this future land use map that we've just gone through and that is provided in detail within the plan. So wanting to make sure that development in the future reflects the community's vision. Also importantly, having alignment with an applicable municipality's comprehensive plan. Again, wanting to make sure that development is reflective of the community's vision. And then that importance of infrastructure and making sure that there is an infrastructure service plan for development. Again, knowing that infrastructure is so important and making sure that that is planned for as part of any applications. And then finally, that the community has had an opportunity to really genuinely be engaged within a process for significant development. So these are the 4 policies that guide land use, and then we will cover the next planning themes. So our first planning theme is around community character. Goal statement for community character is celebrate Guilford County's unique sense of place by balancing agricultural preservation with desired development patterns, context-sensitive site design, and inclusive placemaking. And so we have 3 policies here to help support this planning theme. And they really deal with preservation of historic resources, both buildings as well as cultural landscapes. Second is celebrating the arts and cultural resources and making sure that those continue to be invested in. And then the third policy for the community character theme is prioritizing high quality design and ensuring design is really within character of the area and recognizing just the variations that exist across Guilford County that are reflected in that future land use map and the different place types.
Okay, in the planning theme for attainable housing, the goal statement is to focus on supporting the creation and retention of a diverse range of housing types to accommodate all residents while emphasizing safety and high quality sustainable design. I wanted to point out from the community that, as Jessica mentioned earlier, housing affordability or attainability was the #1 response when asked what you'd most like to improve about Guilford County's quality of life. So there's 4 policies in the plan related to attainable housing. The first is focusing on enabling the creation of new housing units that will provide that diversity and mix of housing types to meet the needs of residents. The second policy is around enabling housing creation and preservation through Guilford County that's attainable for all income levels. Policy 3 is about updating policies to maintain housing affordability in existing units throughout Guilford County. And then policy 4 is encouraging the preservation, maintenance, and development of high quality and safe housing. In the plan, we have included lots of existing conditions and trends information that we've shared with you throughout this planning process, but wanted to highlight a little bit of information around housing. So for reference, in the unincorporated areas, the median home value is just over $300,000. And when you compare how many housing units are currently in the unincorporated portions of the county versus incorporated, you can see about 30,000 in the unincorporated areas and around 187,000 in those areas that are incorporated. And then there's a higher rate of ownership in unincorporated portions of the county at 75% versus 51% in the incorporated areas.
So our third planning theme is transportation and mobility. And I would say that an important kind of cross-cutting idea within the document and the themes is the importance of regional collaboration. So you'll really see that particularly in this goal statement. So the goal statement around transportation and mobility is coordinate with the NCDOT, transit and transportation planning organizations, and local jurisdictions to facilitate safe and efficient transportation infrastructure that serves strategic areas of Guilford County through access to multiple modes of travel. Within the community engagement process, we've asked a lot of questions about how people currently get around the county, how they would like to get around the county. And we really heard and saw the importance of cars and transit for folks to get to and from work or key activity centers, commercial centers, but a real interest in seeing more opportunities for walking and biking, particularly to parks. And so really thinking about the many different ways that we all get around and that they're all important in different ways. So 3 policies within this theme. The first is to provide ongoing support for existing countywide transportation networks and really focusing on universal access, which means kind of ADA access, making sure that all people can access the transportation networks, safety, efficiency, as well as climate-friendly options for both residents and visitors. Our second policy here is to expand, identify opportunities to expand existing regional services and maintaining the county's active role in MPOs that serve the county and other regional organizations. Our third policy is to actively plan for the impacts of climate change on the transportation system. And so thinking about how can we future-proof transportation to make sure folks can get around really effectively within the county. So some existing information related to traffic and commuting patterns A vast majority of folks, over 78% of residents, commute to work by car. And so there is opportunity to adjust that mode split, if you will, and have more people using biking, walking, and transit in the future as part of those regional collaborations. And then the average commute time is just over 22 minutes for folks.
Okay, the next planning theme is diverse economy. So for this goal, the goal statement is to promote a healthy, sustainable economy that fosters partnerships, supports small businesses, incentivizes retention of farmland, and creates an economic climate that will attract and retain both job-generating businesses and their employees. So from the community, in particular and focus group, participants suggested that there is a need to address workforce retention by leveraging specific industries that were mentioned around aerospace and life sciences and food processing and production, as well as understanding the opportunities that come with the planned mega site. So policies that are related to diverse economy include aligning economic development efforts with the future land use map. So you can see where we've identified some of those areas for regional employment centers. Policy 2 is around supporting existing businesses and industries while seeking to increase high-wage jobs and employment opportunities throughout the county. Policy 3 relates to cultivating and supporting workforce training programs to support residents in gaining the skills needed for emerging job opportunities, fostering dynamic and adaptable workforce. And then policy 4 is around prioritizing the preservation of agricultural uses and working farms as a strategic economic development initiative. So a little bit about some of the existing conditions around the economy in the unincorporated portions of the county, as well as the incorporated portions, the service industry, which includes health services, is the highest employment category or sector. In unincorporated areas, that's followed by transportation sector and education. And in the incorporated areas, that's followed by retail, trade, and manufacturing. The Greensboro-Randolph mega site is expected to create more than 5,000 jobs in manufacturing, which has a lot of impacts on the county as a whole. $68 million is the value of the agricultural industry in Guilford County for the year of 2022. And agriculture includes more jobs, as you might imagine, in the unincorporated areas of the county versus the incorporated counties, about over 3 times the amount of jobs. There's also several existing conditions mapping in the plan, some important areas such as the voluntary agricultural districts that are important in the consideration for future land use, as well as understanding where those current job density areas are, which are clustered around the airport, Greensboro, and High Point.
Our next planning theme is about equitable services, and the goal statement is support land use decisions that create equitable distribution of and convenient access to health and emergency services, schools, and parks. So when we think about what we've heard from the community in terms of managing growth, access to services like these was really in the top 3 responses. So something that was really important, and also a piece that we dug into quite a bit with our steering committee. So we've got 2 policies within this planning theme. The first is to work with strategic partners to increase equitable access to services that promote a high quality of life. So that includes schools, healthcare, parks and recreation access, fire, EMS, things like that. Our second policy is to ensure adequate parks and recreation facilities and amenities are located in proximity to existing and planned neighborhoods. And within that policy, we're also trying to support the ongoing work that the county is doing on their parks and open space plan. So the plan talks about what are some of the existing conditions related to some of these services. There are 22 different fire districts within the county, and many of those are run by volunteers. And so kind of important to be thinking about all range of emergency services and how those are distributed throughout the county.
Okay, the next planning theme is the natural environment. The goal statement for natural environment is to ensure the provision of abundant parks as well as the protection of natural vistas and green space through county managed soil erosion, stormwater, and conservation programs so that diverse natural resources are valued and preserved. The relationship with and access to nature and outdoors was the #1 item that the community identified that they're most satisfied related to the quality of life in Guilford County, and really set an impetus for the importance to protect the natural environment in Guilford County. So the policies that support this vision and theme are to improve the quality of Guilford County's natural resources through regional partnerships and implementation of preservation and protection measures. Policy 2 is to safeguard the environmental integrity of regional water sources and recreational water bodies. So really thinking about the quality of the water in Guilford County. Policy 3 is to protect natural features and sensitive areas. Those riparian areas, floodplains, vegetation, and existing tree cover. Policy 4 is to emphasize connectivity for parks, greenways, and broad open spaces, and protect scenic environmental corridors and buffer areas. So there's opportunity to create some greater connectivity between the parks and green spaces that exist in the county. So there's several maps related to natural environment in the document. On the left here is really just covering, showing where the existing forested land cover area is, and as it relates to the floodway and the floodplain. All these considerations went into that environmental suitability map that you saw earlier, as well as some really critical watersheds and flood zones that you have in Guilford County. So those critical watersheds are those areas hatched in red that are have more intense requirements and restrictions on development to help protect those watersheds. There's also been, some shifts, and these are some important context and really highlight some of the importance that we've heard from the community. That there's been an increase in developed land in the county since 2001, as well as a drop in your forested land and agricultural land that we see really throughout the state and around the country since 2001 as well.
And our final theme is infrastructure. Goal statement for infrastructure is create a resilient, coordinated, and high-quality infrastructure system that adapts to the changing needs of the community. And when we're thinking about infrastructure here, we are meaning things like water, sewer, as well as broadband access, and making sure that folks really have access to the infrastructure that can lead to high quality of life. Infrastructure really was the biggest concern when it comes to growth in Guilford County. And so the policies and the action items are intended to really reflect that concern and directive from the community. So our first policy is meet changing demands for infrastructure through regional partnerships and cooperation with service and utility providers. As Brenna said earlier in the presentation, the county is not a utility service provider. And so this is an area that requires great coordination with area municipalities and other service providers. And then the second policy here is to plan for the true cost of infrastructure, to make sure that we really are incorporating that into the thought process and thinking about how to fund infrastructure and just having a pretty holistic approach when it comes to that. So the final chapter within the document is the action playbook, and this is intended to guide implementation of all of these different themes and the overall vision statement for guiding Guilford. So This chapter identifies the specific policy statements and the action items that fall under that policy statement. So for each policy, there are really between 3 and 7 or so specific action items that are identified for the county and partners to take to help implement that. We've also identified the level of investment, high, medium, or low, that's required to implement a specific action. The timing in terms of when it should be prioritized is something that is more immediate versus long-term. And then we've also identified the entity or organization that is responsible or partners that are responsible for implementing those action steps. So trying to create that really clear playbook for the county for the next, again, 10 to 15 years to implement the Guiding Guilford Plan.
Okay. So next steps, as Jessica mentioned earlier, we are here in this plan sharing portion of the planning process. The plan document is live on the website, which we'll share a link to in just a moment. And if you've already had a chance to review and share your feedback, thank you so much. And if you are wanting to take some more time with it, please do that as well. And head to the website at guilfordplan.com to share your feedback. But we're also going to do a couple of questions here and then give you all an opportunity to submit some of your comments here today on this call. And so we'll head over to Mentimeter now. If you all are able to join us over on Mentimeter, we'll start with questions and comments. And you're welcome to drop those in the chat. But in the meantime, if you'd go ahead and kind of get linked up into Mentimeter, you'll go to menti.com or scan the QR code on the page and enter the code 6496-8069 to join us on Mentimeter. Okay, give you all just a moment to get over there.
You can join by phone or computer. You can scan that QR code to join by phone. Or as Brenna said, go to menti.com and enter the code here on the screen.
Okay. A few moments. Great question. So we've already got a question coming in around when the comprehensive plan will be finalized. The goal is to take the feedback. This feedback round ends August 5th, and then the intention is to finish and finalize at the end of this summer. So we'll be sharing those dates and key milestones, but we want to hear feedback from you all as we wrap up and finalize this plan. Jessica, did you have anything or Leslie to add to the timing?
Thank you. The timing is such that, as you mentioned, I'll provide a little bit more flavor to that. Ideally, what we like to do is within the next 4 to 6 weeks, gather your comments, make sure that we get as many comments from the public as possible. We'll go back, we'll review. Once we review, we'll get that to our planning board. Planning board will then have an opportunity to review, and then we'll get that to our board of commissioners, and then ultimately the board of commissioners will adopt. And so in terms of the overall timing, as Jessica mentioned, as Brenna mentioned, we'd like to be able to get that by the end of the summer to the commissioners here within the first quarter of this new fiscal year that starts July 1.
Okay, we've got another question here. Will future development be coordinated with Guilford County school systems, specifically related to any large developments? In the past, the schools were not notified, therefore causing overcrowding.
I can answer that. The answer is yes. In fact, anytime that the county does a rezoning or entertains a rezoning application, we incorporate and get feedback from the schools to get what their population is. I think on their 20th day, what the capacity is of each school. And so we do incorporate that, and that's shared with the planning board when the planning board is contemplating rezoning decisions. And that process will continue.
Great. Okay, I think we did answer this question, Leslie. How long do we have before the plan goes to the commissioners? We'll skip that one. It says creating a plan like this always involves some trade-offs and or prioritizing some things over others. Could you talk a little bit about the process and what may have been excluded from this draft plan?
I'll maybe jump in here and just say that we really tried to make sure that we were being true to the community feedback that we received. And we also really relied on our steering committee to make sure that that we were thinking about other viewpoints that might not have been reflected in feedback. So one of the things I'll maybe talk about in terms of the process that we used is an initial draft that the steering committee reviewed didn't have as significant a focus on agriculture as the current plan that has been finalized and is ready for final review and approval does. And that was really at the urging of some stakeholders, the steering committee, who wanted to make sure that there was a real recognition of the importance that agriculture plays within Guilford County. And so you'll see that as some key statements within the plan. I would say there's nothing that we heard from the community that is not in the plan, right? We heard a lot about different opportunities for transportation improvements, for instance. And as we dug into that with the steering committee, that really started to morph into this leaning on regional partnerships and making sure that we're coordinating with entities who are involved in transportation. So I would say that from my perspective, there's nothing that's been excluded from the draft plan. There's maybe some different emphasis that's been placed on things through the process. And I don't know, Leslie or Brenna, if you would add anything to that.
One thing I would add is because we talk about this idea of regionalism, that in terms of detail, because each topic that includes accomplishments through regionalism, there's not necessarily a one size fits all. And while it would have been nice to really go in and drill down in the weeds and say, okay, here's how we'll work with these jurisdictions on this or these jurisdictions with that and get into a lot of detail, the plan doesn't really require that or calls for that. But I think as time moves on and as we get into the implementation phase of some of these things, some of that will bear themselves out. And so it's hard to say right now, this is how accomplishing this particular goal, this is what this looks like. This is who's on first, who's on second, who's on third base. And so it would have been nice to have that in this plan. But I think that the complexity of some of what we're dealing with actually is more of a real time. And as we get more focused in on some of those things, then we'll actually define what that playbook looks like.
That's a great point. I think I would add, that a comprehensive plan like this is really meant to be a living document that is used. And so that action playbook is really that starting point. And as things get implemented, there's a lot more coordination that has to happen in order to make things happen. Okay. Is there a plan for regular updates after adoption? Leslie, I think I'll have you answer this one.
So that will depend on what it is. So in terms of a periodic time frame that says, we'll review this at least on an annual basis. And so as things evolve around us that would call for this plan to change, then certainly there's a process by which this plan would be changed. And so we'll review that, and that we're really responsibility of staff, sort of as the gatekeeper, so to speak, to make sure that timeframes are adhered to as much as possible. And again, as things change and evolve and as new needs arise, then there may be new things that may need to be added into this plan.
Great. Okay. Will the plans include to use existing empty buildings before removing trees?
Yeah, I'll maybe jump in and say that that is the idea of using existing infrastructure and, you know, where development is currently versus moving out into the more rural portions of the county is an underlying theme and is part of what we've incorporated into the future land use map and those specific land use policies.
Okay. For future growth, will contractors, et cetera, be required to adhere to these policies, or are these just guidelines?
That's a great question, and I think gets to the heart of what's a comprehensive plan versus what is adopted code. And so this provides the framework for future kind of code changes, zoning changes, and policy changes at the county. So in this moment, these are guidelines, and it's up to kind of that implementation step, that next step that Leslie just talked about, to make sure that they're incorporated as requirements. And so that might be a an immediate next step, is to identify specific areas of county policies or codes that can be updated to make sure that the ideas in the plan are incorporated and enforceable.
Yeah, I'll give one example of that would be more near term and really timely as well. And that is sort of how we address housing in Guilford County. Under what's called Euclidean or traditional zoning, you have certain uses in certain places. And so I think this also provides an opportunity where we can look at, for example, what normally would be a traditional single family development that provides a mixture of what's called the middle housing. So you'll have single family residential, potentially duplexes within the same development, but very closely, they both have the same architectural style. And so those are some things that we can do to expand where things like duplexes and that other missing middle housing can go. Those are more immediate things that we can address in our zoning ordinance if and when this is adopted by the commissioners.
Okay. Leslie, that might have already answered this next question, but if you have anything else to expand around some of the specific strategies that are recommended to address the affordable and attainable housing needs.
I'll just add that again, one of the things that we can do is reduce the lot size for duplexes, for example, allow duplexes, encourage duplexes where we have traditionally just have single family residential housing. I think one of the other things is what can we do in terms of capitalizing on regional infrastructure opportunities that may present itself to have higher densities. And when you think about it, preservation of farmland and having infrastructure for higher density actually can support one another, because you need less land to put more houses within that particular area. So it can also be used as a strategy, again, to help preserve farmland as well, while also helping to address the housing need.
Okay. This question is asking, where is the special district mentioned in the plan? And I'm not sure, Jessica, if that's one that you might be able to
We might
address.
need to come back to that, or I might ask folks to give some clarification, either through Mentimeter or through the Q&A in the Zoom webinar, of what you're meaning by special district, so that we can make sure that we're answering that. So we'll maybe move to the next question. We've got about 7 minutes left and want to make sure we get to as many as we can. But if you could clarify, that would be great.
Awesome. Okay, I see a lot of new apartment complexes going up east of the county, but no new grocery stores. Only one grocery store in Whitsett, Sedalia. Otherwise, have to travel to Burlington when I travel. So it sounds like maybe more of a comment, and I'm not sure if Leslie or Jessica, if you have anything to kind of add to that comment. I know that there's some discussion in the plan around access to food and grocery as part of some of the guide and policy recommendations, but feel free to add anything to that.
Yeah, and I'll just add as you go to the next question that we have really tried to incorporate that and why there's an equitable services section within the plan, and trying to anticipate those types of really important commercial uses in our different future land use types to make sure that you've got access to food and important services.
Awesome. And this next question around wildlife health and preservation is a part of the plan, and this is definitely a part of the natural environment theme and recommendations, and does discuss wildlife connectivity and corridors, specifically around regional partnerships to address that. Okay. Probably have time just for a couple more questions. So we might not be able to make it through all of these in this chat here, but can you expand on growing infrastructure identified as the biggest concern? Is it addressing lack of infrastructure or current approach and reach?
I think both.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think both. I think one is the county itself in unincorporated areas infrastructurally constrained. We know that, but also I think in terms of the regional approaches and how we can work with other jurisdictions, both inside and outside of the county. One of the things that the state is looking at also from an economic development standpoint is Guilford County is in the heart of what's called the Carolina Core. And that is an economic development corridor that extends several counties. And the state is even itself looking at regional approaches to infrastructure to help promote economic development. And so I think that as those things are identified, that as they say, the devil will be in the details, is how do you then, get boots on the ground to implement something like that? And how is it done from an equitable perspective? So I think we've got a lot of work to do as it relates to that. And it's going to take a number of jurisdictions and a number of folk rolling up their sleeves and really getting to work and really trying to make this happen. But I also think it's an opportunity to do something significant and monumental as well.
So there's one question in the Zoom chat that Jessica, I think you could answer, which is around a plan for medical services such as urgent care or minute clinic place types in the southeast portion of the county.
Yeah, and what I'll start with is that the future land use map identifies a kind of framework for different types of land uses, but does not identify necessarily specific parcels for a certain type of development. So it's not identifying a specific parcel for an urgent care clinic in the southeast area of the county. That said, it's again why we have some important policies and an entire theme around equitable distribution of services, is recognizing the need for both kind of food systems as well as health and emergency care throughout the county. And so that's really covered under that specific theme.
Awesome. I see some people were able to jump ahead in the Mentimeter and got a few responses so far, but if you are able to answer this question, these are the same kind of open-ended questions that we have in the feedback form online. And so feel free to drop your responses in here, or again, if you'd like to spend some more time with the plan and respond on the survey on the website. But what excites you most about the draft plan and what you're hearing so far? We've heard that they love the focus on preserving green space, the inclusion of environmental considerations, but want to see how it's going to be enforced. And then maybe that had some challenges with the last question around entering information about yourself. We'll make sure that you all can access this if you need to refill out this survey. It's able to be taken on your own time after this, so we'll send out a link to you all. Not filling the unincorporated area with employment centers and the focus on regional collaboration. That there is a plan and hopefully it will be followed. Mixed use in locations other than near city centers. Okay, and with just 1 minute left, again, you're welcome to keep adding your comments here, but we'll just go on to the next one to read a couple of the other thoughts or comments that you all have. So how can partners and municipalities support the implementation? And then reality of private ownership may limit how plan guidance plays out in implementation. There's some other considerations that have been added here. I'm going to close out and just pull up a final slide for you all here, just so that you have information about next steps and where to go to keep finding information on the plan. Just 1 moment.
So as we said, visit guilfordplan.com and there's a copy of the plan there, and then a survey that is open through August 5th in anticipation of moving into conversations for adoption later in August. And if you are free this evening, we do have an in-person meeting at Southeast Guilford High School from 5:30 to 7. And Leslie, I'll maybe turn it to you for any closing thoughts.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. The first one is appreciate everyone giving up their time. This is very important for us, and we're really interested in what your feedback is so we can get this to our planning board and board of commissioners. The other thing that I'll mention is we have sent this to our member jurisdictions, other towns, cities here in Guilford County. So when we talk about regionalism and partnerships and collaboration, it's important to get their perspective and get their thoughts on this as well. And so we have done that. So we look forward to those comments. And then again, I wanted to ask Brenna and Jessica for any of the questions that we didn't get an opportunity to get to. Will they be somewhere on the website so that those folk will have an opportunity to see what those others were that maybe we didn't address?
Yeah, for sure. We'll send a follow-up to folks who participated in the webinar, and then we'll make sure that there's additional information online answering your questions. And please feel free to reach out to us through guilfordplan.com if you have any additional questions. And again, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really wanted to make sure that other folk could see what some of the other questions were. That was really, since we did, because we've gotten up into the 20s, I think, and I know we didn't get a chance to get through all of them, so to show them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to sign off and thank you so much.